Carly Spencer has never been the kind of woman who waits for permission, and Port Charles has learned, often the hard way, that once she points her fury in a direction, she doesn't miss. This time, that fury has a name and a face: Jack Brennan. The man who wears polished civility like a mask has been moving pieces on a board Carly didn't even know existed, until Jason Morgan returned and told her the part she never wanted to hear. Jocelyn, bright and fierce and still so young, had been courted by the same shadow network that chews people up and calls it patriotism. The revelation didn't break Carly, it tempered her. If Brennan thought he could pull a thread from Carly's family and not feel the whole tapestry snap back, he's about to learn how wrong he is. Carly begins with the only step that makes sense when walking into a war you don't fully understand: she recruits a ghost. Damian Spinelli, every firewall's nightmare and every secret's worst luck, becomes her quartermaster. He collects identities with the same care surgeons reserve for beating hearts: layers of verifiable history, passport stamps that match airline manifests, digital breadcrumbs so ordinary they look accidental. In his hands, Carly becomes someone else on paper and, soon enough, in a mirror: sleek brown wig, librarian glasses, cool legal polish, a forged pedigree crisp enough to fool the most humorless bureaucrat. Barbara Saunders, attorney of record, strides into Steinmore like she owns the oxygen, and the Swiss prison's famously unblinking security blinks first. Beyond the reinforced doors, Valentin Cassadine sits in a cell that doesn't fit him. He recognizes Carly the moment her silhouette cuts the light. Of course he does. Valentin collects tells and souls with equal precision. He plays along, amused and wary in equal measure, until she closes the distance and lets the mask drop. The dance between them is not flirtation, at least, not at first. It's mutual recognition. Two apex predators, each choosing not to bite. He teases her about letting Jack adopt her, testing the perimeter of her resolve. Carly doesn't flinch. She explains, in clean, lethal strokes, what Brennan did. Not to her, but to her daughter. Val's smile disappears. There are lines even Cassadines will not cross without consequences, and children sit behind every one of them. Carly doesn't ask for sympathy, she asks for strategy. For a moment, Valentin imagines Charlotte in Jocelyn's place and gives her the only honest answer a father like him can give. He would not rest until the threat lay 6 feet under and silence had reclaimed the night. That confession is not a plan, but it is a promise, and it binds them more tightly than any handshake. From that point forward, the conversation stops being about whether Carly should move against Brennan and becomes about how to make each step matter. How to knock a man off balance who keeps a second set of feet hidden in the dark. What makes this alliance so combustible is not just their shared enemy, it's the dissonance of their histories. Carly has built a life on willpower and gut instinct, augmented by the muscle and moral flexibility of men like Sonny and Jason. Valentin was forged in colder fires, espionage, calculation, the kind of patience that looks like kindness until the blade turns. Together, they are friction and spark. She presses for immediate damage, leaked files, burned safe houses, planted whispers that make nervous handlers blink at the wrong time. He sketches the long corridor, where Brennan's authority actually sits, which committees protect him by pretending they've never heard his name, how you choke the air supply to a hydra instead of cutting heads that regrow. They argue and refine and prune until the map between them stops looking like revenge and starts looking like victory. Yet even as they plan, Carly holds something back, and not because she doubts Valentin's competence. She understands him too well. If he knew everything, he'd move in ways she couldn't control, and control is the only tool she has that doesn't require collateral damage. She keeps her circle brutal small. Not even Jason knows what she's going to do, at least not now, because if Jason tries to stop her, and he will, she'll have to choose between the partner who has pulled her from more graves than she can count and the mother who will never forgive herself if she hesitates. Better, for the moment, to carry the weight alone and apologize later. She can live with the guilt, she cannot live with the regret. Brennan, for his part, has the unhelpful habit of surviving. People call him the Walking Dead, with equal parts awe and exasperation because every time the walls seem to close, a new corridor appears. He doesn't swagger. Swagger is for men who need to be seen. Brennan behaves as if the world owes him courtesy, and the world pays, with deference, with budgets, with plausible deniability. That's his superpower. He is not dramatic. He is bureaucratic, which is far more dangerous. He can erase a line of funding and strand a battlefield. He can shift an asset's status from protected to expendable with a keystroke. He can make a mother's scream sound paranoid in a report. And he almost made Jocelyn another line in a ledger. Spinelli's craftsmanship buys Carly time, but time is elastic in Brennan's world. Files move. Cover names molt. The moment a mouth forms the truth, it's already stale. That's where Valentin becomes essential. He knows the rhythm. He anticipates the counter move, the reflexive tightening that happens when an operation smells a leak. He warns Carly that if Brennan sniffed her proximity, he wouldn't engage, he'd make her vanish, efficiently and without poetry. It isn't meant to scare her, it's meant to calibrate her. Carly's answer is a steady stare. Threats bounce off the armor of a mother who has already pictured the worst and decided not to bury her child. Of course, none of this happens in a vacuum. Port Charles is a village with long memories and louder opinions. Nina Reeves, all wounded pride and inconvenient tenderness, learned long ago that Valentin can ignite old habits with a glance. She will not appreciate Carly standing within arm's reach of a man who once rewired her heart. Sonny's reaction is inevitable, territorial, incredulous, grim. He respects Valentin only as far as necessity demands, and necessity has never had the same definition in Sonny's house as it does in the Cassadine Atlas. Jason, calmer and infinitely more dangerous, doesn't posture. He assesses the angle of each risk and the depth of Carly's resolve and finds the shortest path to minimizing casualties, even if that means cutting across her plan. The possibility of romance between Carly and Valentin, ridiculous on paper, combustible in proximity, becomes part of the battlefield whether anyone wants it or not. Attraction creates strange cover, it also creates blind spots. Everyone knows this. No one will admit it. Meanwhile, Brennan tests his own pressure points. He doesn't need to threaten Jason directly, he threatens Jason's oxygen, family, loyalties, the fragile structures of peace that keep the man anchored. He corners the market on inconvenience, shipments delayed, favors recalled, allies encouraged to choose different rooms. He keeps his hands clean and lets the ripples look like bad luck. It's not an explosion, it's erosion. But erosion collapses cliffs, and Brennan counts on gravity to perform the final violence. The question, unspoken but carved into every scene, is how far Carly is willing to go, not as a headline but as a person. Disguises are not her natural language, honesty is. She wields the truth like a cudgel when it suits her. Now she has to lie convincingly and repeatedly, not just to adversaries but to people who would lay down their lives for her. She has to keep still when every fiber of her body wants to swing. She has to decide whether justice in this arena requires the kind of outcome she once swore she didn't want, whether a man like Brennan can be allowed to breathe after what he's done and what he's willing to do next. Valentin doesn't ask her to name the line, he simply keeps placing options on the table and watching which ones she pushes away and which ones she keeps close enough to touch. Laura Wright has hinted, outside the fiction, at the shock of seeing these two forces share a frame not as enemies but as co-conspirators. Inside the fiction, it plays as inevitability. Port Charles rewards audacity. Carly's audacity has always been loud, Valentin's has always been precise. Marry the two and you get a campaign that feels less like a caper and more like a chess endgame with no clock. They don't aim for spectacle. They aim for compounding pressure, turning Brennan's assets into liabilities, cutting off his deniability, making him choose between saving his reputation and saving his skin. Each choice he makes becomes a breadcrumb that, added together, spells guilt in a language even oversight committees understand. And still, the human mess keeps leaking in. There's the moment, brief, unrepeatable, when Carly laughs at something small and real and Valentin looks at her as if he's surprised to remember that he's human. There's the counter moment when he slips into that old Cassadine chill and she remembers every reason she ever had to hate the last name. There are corridors where their elbows brush, and they both look away because they can't afford the rumor, not now, not with Nina's eyes on them and Sonny's patience wearing thin and Jason's silence turning into a weather system. The story doesn't ask them to fall in love. It asks them to trust each other exactly long enough to do something impossible and then to survive the aftermath of having trusted. The aftermath is already writing itself. Nina will draw lines in sand she pretends are stone. Sonny will yank back every protective net he ever cast around Carly and find, to his irritation, that she no longer fits beneath them. Jason will say little and do much, he always does. And Brennan, If he isn't 6 feet under by the time the sun finishes with them, we'll learn what it means to be hunted by a woman who refuses to be a footnote and a man who has made a career of slipping out of cages. Maybe he becomes a cautionary tale whispered in corridors that once welcomed him. Maybe he disappears in a way that even legends can't reconstruct. Either way, his era ends the moment Carly steps into that cell and convinces a Cassadine that their Venn diagram has room for vengeance. What makes this arc sing is not only the plot mechanics, the fake passports, the prison gambits, the techno-sorcery that turns passwords into suggestions, but the moral geometry underneath. Carly isn't playing at spies, she's rewriting the rules of what mothers in Port Charles will tolerate when the world puts their children on a list. Valentin isn't doing penance, he's honoring a code he rarely admits he believes in. Together they assemble an answer to Brennan that feels, paradoxically, bigger than both of them and also deeply personal. If the town is shocked, good. If lines blur, better. Soap operas live in the spaces where unlikely alliances force everyone to recalibrate who they are and what they're capable of forgiving. So no, this isn't a love story, not yet, not necessarily. It's a war story told in whispers and side doors, with a dash of theater and a lot of paperwork. It's Carly in a brown wig walking past men who've underestimated women for a living. It's Valentin turning a steel bed into a war room. It's Spinelli humming to himself as he shuffles data like tarot. It's Jason arriving one beat too late to stop her and exactly on time to make sure she doesn't bleed alone. It's Nina stiffening in a doorway, it's Sunny stiffening in a different one. It's Brennan finally realizing that the dead who walk aren't always villains, they're the consequences you thought you dodge. And it's Port Charles doing what it always does when a storm hits, choosing sides, changing shapes, and watching, breath held, to see which empire falls.